The woman's trembling hands clutched a single carpet bag as she stepped off the dusty stagecoach in Miles City, Montana. And the late afternoon sun of July 1882 cast her shadow long across the rutted Main Street like a dark promise of the difficult road ahead. Catalina Lopez had traveled 3,000 miles from a small village in northern Italy, through ships that rocked her stomach and trains that rattled her bones, following a letter from her uncle who had promised work and safety in America. But when she arrived at the address he had given, she found only an abandoned boarding house with broken windows and a rusted padlock on the door. The neighboring shopkeeper, after much confusion and hand gestures, finally made her understand through his own broken Italian that her uncle had died 6 months prior in a mine collapse up in the territories. She stood on the wooden boardwalk now, 22 years old and utterly alone, with $17 sewn into the hem of her dress and a vocabulary of perhaps 30 English words. The shopkeeper had pointed her toward the boarding house at the end of town, the only one still taking lodgers, and she walked slowly in that direction, her worn boots clicking against the planks. Miles City was a sprawling frontier settlement that had grown up around the confluence of the Tongue and Yellowstone rivers, serving as a major supply point for ranches, soldiers, and traders moving through Montana territory. The streets bustled with cowboys, soldiers from nearby Fort Keogh, merchants, and the occasional Cheyenne or Crow trader. The buildings were mostly rough-hewn wood, some painted, many not, and the air smelled of horse manure, wood smoke, and the yeasty aroma of fresh bread from somewhere nearby. Catalina's dark hair was pinned tightly beneath a threadbare bonnet, and her dress, which had been respectable when she left Italy, now bore the stains and wear of a long journey. Her olive skin was dusty from travel, and her brown eyes, though red rimmed with exhaustion and unshed tears, still held a determination that had carried her across an ocean. She was so focused on putting one foot in front of the other that she did not notice the wagon backing out of the alley until she nearly walked into its path. The driver shouted something she could not understand, yanking hard on the reins. The horses whinnied and stamped, their massive hooves churning the dirt dangerously close to where she had frozen in place. Before she could move, strong hands gripped her shoulders and pulled her backward onto the boardwalk. She stumbled against a solid chest and heard a deep voice say something else incomprehensible but soothing in tone. The wagon rattled past, the driver still shouting, and slowly she turned to see who had saved her. The man was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders under a worn leather vest and a blue cotton shirt that had seen better days. His hair was the color of wheat at harvest time, slightly too long and curling at his collar, and his face was tanned and weathered from years under the Montana sun. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a startling blue-gray like the sky before a storm, and they looked at her with genuine concern. "You all right, miss?" he asked, his hand still steadying her arms. Catalina understood the tone if not the words. She nodded quickly, her heart hammering from the near accident and now from the proximity of this stranger. "Yes," she managed, one of her precious English words. "Yes, thank you." His expression shifted to something she could not quite read as he heard her heavy accent. "You are new in town," he said, speaking more slowly as if that might help. She nodded again, frustrated by her inability to explain. "My uncle," she said carefully, the words thick on her tongue. "I come for uncle, but he—" She made a gesture that could have meant anything, her eyes welling with tears she refused to let fall. The cowboy's expression softened further. He looked at her carpetbag, at her travel-worn appearance, and seemed to understand more than her words had conveyed. "I am sorry," he said simply. Then he touched the brim of his hat in a gesture she recognized as respectful. "My name is Colt Anderson. I work at the Three Rivers Ranch just west of town." She caught his name and offered her own. "Catalina Lopez." He repeated it slowly, getting the pronunciation nearly correct, and when he said it, her name sounded beautiful rather than foreign and strange. "Catalina, that is a pretty name. Where are you from?" She caught the question in his tone. "Italia," she said. "Italy." "Italy," he repeated and smiled. It transformed his whole face, making him look younger than she had first thought, perhaps 27 or 28. "That is a long way from Montana." She did not understand all his words, but she understood his smile, and despite everything, she found herself smiling back just a little. "You need help?" he asked, gesturing toward her bag and then down the street. She hesitated. In her village, women did not accept help from strange men, but this was not her village, and she was alone in a way she had never imagined possible. "Board house," she said carefully, pulling a piece of paper from her pocket where she had written the name the shopkeeper had given her. "Mrs. Thornton." Colt glanced at the paper and nodded. "Martha Thornton's place. I will walk you there. These streets can be rough, especially for—" He paused, seeming to search for words she might understand. "Especially at this time of day." She did not catch everything, but his gesture down the street and his picking up of her bag made his meaning clear. She nodded, grateful, and fell into step beside him. They walked in silence for a moment, and Catalina was acutely aware of the stares from other people on the street. She had grown used to being stared at during her journey, the foreign woman who did not belong, but somehow having this tall cowboy walking beside her made it feel less crushing. "How long have you been in America?" Colt asked, still speaking slowly and clearly. She held up fingers. 3 weeks. "On ship many days. Then train. 3 weeks," he said thoughtfully. "And you traveled alone?" She nodded, lifting her chin with a pride that overcame her exhaustion. "Alone, yes." Something in his expression changed, a respect that had not been there before. "That takes courage," he said quietly. "A lot of courage." She did not know the word courage, but she heard the tone of his voice and felt warmth spread through her chest, despite the fear and uncertainty that had been her constant companions since learning of her uncle's death. They reached the boarding house, a 2-story structure that looked more solid than many of the other buildings in town. Colt opened the gate in the white picket fence and gestured for her to precede him up the path. Before she could knock, the door opened to reveal a sturdy woman in her 50s with gray-streaked brown hair and sharp blue eyes that took in the scene with one sweeping glance. "Afternoon, Martha," Colt said, removing his hat. "This is Miss Catalina Lopez. She is new in town and looking for a room." Martha Thornton looked Catalina up and down with the assessing gaze of someone who had seen much in her life and was not easily fooled. "Italian, by the sound of your name," she said directly to Catalina. "You speak English." "Little," Catalina admitted, holding her thumb and forefinger close together in the universal gesture for small. "Very little." Martha's expression did not soften, but it did not harden either. "Rooms are 50 cents a night, $3 a week, paid in advance. Breakfast included, dinner extra. No men in your room, no loud noise after 9 o'clock, and you keep your space clean." "Understood." Catalina caught perhaps half of that, but she understood money and nodded. "Yes, I have." She fumbled for the word, "money." "Good." Martha stepped back to let her in, then looked at Colt. "Thank you for bringing her, Colt. Your grandmother would have been proud to see you helping folks." Colt's expression flickered with something like old pain, but he just nodded. "Thank you, Martha." Then he turned to Catalina and handed her the carpet bag. "You will be safe here. Martha runs a good place." Catalina took the bag, her fingers brushing his for just a moment. "Thank you," she said, putting as much feeling as she could into those 2 words. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson." "Just Colt," he said with that transforming smile again. "And you are welcome, Catalina." He settled his hat back on his head and turned to go, but something made him pause at the gate. He looked back at her, standing in the doorway of the boarding house looking small and lost and brave all at once. "I come into town most Saturdays," he said. "If you need anything, if you need help understanding something, you can find me at the Silver Dollar Saloon around noon. Just ask anyone." She did not understand all of it, but she caught Saturday and help and nodded. "Saturday," she repeated. He smiled again, touched his hat brim, and walked away down the street with the easy, rolling gait of a man who spent most of his life on horseback. Martha cleared her throat. "Come on then, girl. Let me show you your room and we will see about getting some food in you. You look half-starved." The next few days were the hardest Catalina had experienced since leaving Italy. Martha's boarding house was clean and respectable, and the older woman, though gruff, was not unkind. But Catalina quickly realized that without English, without connections, and with her money running out far faster than she had anticipated, she was in a precarious position. She tried to find work, walking from shop to shop with her dictionary, pointing at the word for work and hoping someone would understand. But everywhere she went, she received the same response. Shopkeepers looked at her with pity or suspicion, heard her broken English and shook their heads. One woman at the general store spoke loudly and slowly, as if volume might bridge the language gap, asking if she could cook or clean. But when Catalina said yes, the woman wanted references, wanted to know where she had worked before, and Catalina could not explain about her uncle or Italy or anything else in a way that made sense. By Thursday, she had been in Miles City for almost a week and had found nothing. She sat in her small room that evening, counting her remaining money by candlelight, and felt despair creeping in like winter cold. She had $12 left. At $3 a week for the room, she had perhaps 3 more weeks before she would be on the street with nothing. She thought about Colt Anderson's words, about finding him on Saturday if she needed help, but her pride rebelled against the idea. She had crossed an ocean alone. She had survived her uncle's death and being stranded in a foreign land. She would find a way. She had to. Friday morning, Martha knocked on her door early. When Catalina opened it, the older woman held a basket of laundry. "I need help with washing today," Martha said, speaking slowly and gesturing at the basket. "My regular girl is sick. I will pay you 50 cents and give you dinner." Interested, Catalina understood enough. "Work, money." "Yes," she said eagerly. "Yes, thank you." The work was hard, hauling water and scrubbing sheets and shirts and all manner of clothes in the yard behind the boarding house, but Catalina threw herself into it with a will. She knew how to work. In her village, she had helped her mother with washing, with cooking, with tending the small garden that fed their family. Physical labor did not frighten her. Martha watched her work throughout the morning and afternoon, saying little but observing everything. When the last sheet was hung on the line to dry in the hot summer sun, Martha brought out 2 glasses of lemonade and gestured for Catalina to sit on the back step with her. "You are a hard worker," Martha said, handing her the glass. "I will give you that." Catalina sipped the tart, sweet drink and nodded her thanks. "Why did you come to Miles City?" Martha asked. "What brought you all this way?" Catalina pulled out her ever-present dictionary, the pages now worn soft from constant use, and carefully found words. "Uncle, he write, he say come. Work here, safe here." She paused, searching for more words. "But uncle dead. I come too late." Martha's expression softened slightly. "I am sorry, that is a hard thing." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "What did you do in Italy? Before you came here?" "I work with mother, sewing." make dress and help father with. She could not find the word and made gestures of digging, of growing, garden, farming, yes, garden, and olive trees for oil. So you can sow and you can work gardens. Catalina nodded eagerly. And cook. I cook good, Italian food. Martha considered this, her sharp eyes distant. There might be something, she said slowly. Let me think on it. For now, can you come help me again tomorrow, same pay? Yes, Catalina said immediately. Thank you, Mrs. Thornton. Martha, the older woman corrected. If we are going to work together, you call me Martha. That night, Catalina lay in her narrow bed and felt the first tiny spark of hope since arriving in Miles City. She had made $14 now, counting the 2.50-cent payments from Martha. It was not much, but it was something. It meant she had bought herself a little more time. Saturday dawned clear and hot, the kind of day where the sun felt like a physical weight on your shoulders. Catalina helped Martha with the morning work, washing breakfast dishes and sweeping the floors, and then Martha told her she could have the afternoon free. Catalina walked into town, not with any specific purpose, but just to move, to see, to feel less trapped. The main street was busier than she had seen it before, full of cowboys who had come in from the surrounding ranches for their day off, and soldiers from Fort Keogh looking for entertainment. She kept to the boardwalks, staying out of the way, watching this foreign world swirl around her. She was standing outside the general store, looking at fabric in the window and thinking about the dress she would make if she had money to spare for such things, when she heard a familiar voice. Catalina. She turned and there was Colt Anderson, cleaned up from when she had seen him last, wearing a fresh shirt and with his hair still damp as if he had just bathed. He carried his hat in his hand and his face lit up when she met his eyes. "Hello," she said, suddenly shy. She had thought about him several times over the past week, remembering his kindness, but she had not truly expected to see him again. "I was hoping I might see you," he said, and even with her limited English, she could hear the sincerity in his words. "Are you doing all right? Have you found work?" "Little work," she said, gesturing to indicate small. "With Martha, washing clothes." He nodded encouragingly. "That is good. Martha is fair. She will treat you right." He hesitated, then said, "Have you eaten lunch? I was about to get something at the cafe. Would you like to join me?" She understood most of that and felt her cheeks warm. In her village, this would have been scandalous, but she was not in her village anymore and she was hungry, and he was the only person in this entire town who had shown her real kindness besides Martha. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." The cafe was small and smelled of fried potatoes and coffee. Colt led her to a table by the window and pulled out her chair, a gesture of courtesy that surprised her. When the waitress came, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, Colt ordered for both of them, glancing at Catalina to make sure she did not object. When the woman left, he leaned forward slightly. "I am glad to see you," he said. "I have been thinking about you this week, wondering if you were managing all right." She caught enough to understand and felt that warmth in her chest again. "You are kind," she said carefully. "Very kind man." He looked almost embarrassed. "I just remember what it was like to feel alone. After my grandmother died 3 years ago, I felt lost for a long time. She raised me after my parents died when I was young, and I had the advantage of speaking the language and knowing the place. I cannot imagine how hard this must be for you." She understood perhaps half of his words, but she understood the feeling behind them, the shared experience of loss and loneliness. "Grandmother," she repeated. "My grandmother, too. She dead before I leave Italy. She want me to go to have better life. I think she'd be sad to see me now." "No," Colt said firmly, and reached across the table to briefly touch her hand before pulling back, as if suddenly aware of the intimacy of the gesture. "She would be proud. You came all this way, you are still fighting. That is something to be proud of." Their food arrived, simple but hot, and they ate in a comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Colt said, "May I ask you something?" She nodded. "Your English is hard for people to understand, I know. But when you talk, when you try to explain things even though the words are difficult, there is something about it. The way you search for words, the way you use your hands to help explain." He paused, looking almost shy himself now. "Your voice is music, no matter the words." "Do you understand what I mean?" She stared at him, this cowboy who had saved her from a wagon and now sat across from her saying things she could barely comprehend, but that made her heart beat faster. "Music," she repeated. "Yes, music. Beautiful." He made a gesture as if he were playing a violin. "Like a song." She felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected and hot. In the past week she had felt ugly and stupid and small, every interaction a reminder that she did not belong, that her words were wrong and her accent was too thick, and she was a burden. And here was this man, this stranger, telling her that her voice was music. "Thank you," she whispered, and the two words carried more weight than they ever had before. His eyes held hers and something passed between them, unspoken but profound. "You are welcome, Catalina." They talked through the rest of the meal, a halting, patient conversation where he asked simple questions and she answered as best she could. And sometimes they just smiled at each other when words failed completely. He told her about the Three Rivers Ranch where he worked, about the cattle and the horses, about the land that stretched for miles under the big Montana sky. She told him about Italy, about the village nestled in the hills where everyone knew everyone, about the sea that was only a day's walk away, and how she had never seen it until she left. When they finally left the cafe, the afternoon sun was slanting long across the street. Colt walked with her back toward the boarding house, taking his time, and at the gate he paused. "May I see you again?" he asked. "Next Saturday, or maybe sooner if I can get into town during the week." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "I want to see you." His smile was like sunrise. "Good. That is good." He touched his hat. "Until next time, Catalina." "Until next time, Colt." She watched him walk away, and for the first time since arriving in Montana, she felt something other than fear and loneliness. She felt anticipation. She felt hope. And underneath it all, she felt the first stirring of something deeper, something she had not expected to find in this wild, foreign place. The next week brought changes. Martha, true to her word, had been thinking. On Monday morning, she called Catalina into the kitchen where she was preparing breakfast for the boarders. "I have been talking to some people," Martha said, speaking slowly and clearly. "I told them about a young woman I know who can sew and cook and is looking for work. Mrs. Henderson, the doctor's wife, needs help with sewing. Her regular seamstress moved away last month. And the restaurant down the street, the Yellowstone Cafe, they need someone to help in the kitchen in the mornings. The pay is not much, but together, it might be enough for you to get by." Catalina's eyes widened as she worked through the words. "You do this for me." "I did this because you work hard and do not complain, and because I think you deserve a chance," Martha said gruffly. "Now do not make me regret it. Mrs. Henderson expects you this afternoon at 2 o'clock. Her house is the white one with blue shutters on 2nd Street, and the cafe wants you to start tomorrow at 5 in the morning. Think you can handle it?" "Yes," Catalina said, her voice choked with gratitude. "Yes, I can. Thank you, Martha. Thank you so much." "Well, go on then. And wash your face. You look like you are about to cry, and Mrs. Henderson does not appreciate weeping." But Martha's eyes were not unkind as she said it. Mrs. Henderson was a petite woman in her early 40s with brown hair going gray at the temples and a brisk, efficient manner. Her house was the finest Catalina had seen in Miles City, with real glass windows and carpets on the floors. She led Catalina to a sunny sitting room where a pile of mending and sewing waited. "Martha tells me you can sew," Mrs. Henderson said, holding up a shirt that needed buttons replaced. "Show me." Catalina took the shirt and examined it, then carefully threaded a needle with the matching thread and began to sew. Her stitches were small and even, practiced from years of helping her mother. Mrs. Henderson watched in silence, then nodded. "That is good work. Very good work." She gestured at the pile. "I need these things mended. Some are simple, like buttons and torn seams. Some are more complicated, and I have fabric for 2 new dresses that I need made. Can you do that?" "Yes," Catalina said confidently. Sewing she understood. Sewing spoke a universal language, Mrs. Henderson named a price that seemed generous to Catalina, and they agreed that she would come 3 afternoons a week to work. It was steady money, combined with the cafe job, and Catalina felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She started at the Yellowstone Cafe the next morning, arriving in the dark at 5 o'clock to find the kitchen already warm and fragrant with baking bread. The owner, a large German man named Otto, spoke even less English than Catalina in some ways, but they understood each other through gestures and the shared language of cooking. He showed her how he wanted the vegetables chopped, the potatoes peeled, the eggs prepared, and she fell into the rhythm of it quickly. The work was hard and the days were long, but Catalina felt purpose returning to her life. She woke before dawn to work at the cafe, spent her afternoon sewing for Mrs. Henderson or helping Martha with the boarding house chores, and fell into bed at night exhausted but satisfied. And through it all, she thought about Colt Anderson and counted the days until Saturday. He came to town on Wednesday evening, riding in just as she was leaving Mrs. Henderson's house with her week's sewing pay in her pocket. She saw him tie his horse outside the general store and felt her heart leap. "Colt," she called, and he turned, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Catalina. I was hoping I might see you. I told my boss I needed to pick up supplies, but really I just wanted to check how you were doing." She understood enough and smiled. "I have work now. 2 works, I sew and I cook at cafe." "That is wonderful." He looked genuinely pleased. "I am so glad to hear it." "You look happy." "I am happy," she said, and realized it was true. Still hard, but better. Much better. They walked together toward the boarding house, and Colt told her about his week at the ranch, about a young colt that had been born and how they were preparing for the fall roundup. She listened, catching what words she could and simply enjoying the sound of his voice, the way his hands moved when he talked, the way he looked at her as if she were the only person in the world. At the gate, he hesitated. "There is a dance on Saturday night at the community hall." "Nothing fancy, just the town folks and some of the ranch hands. Would you like to go?" With me, she understood dance and Saturday and me, and that was enough. "Yes," she said, "I would like that. I will come get you at 7 o'clock. Is that all right?" "Yes, 7 o'clock." He smiled, that beautiful transforming smile, and touched her hand briefly before heading back to his horse. She watched him ride away into the sunset, and her heart felt full in a way it had not since before her grandmother died. Saturday came with a flutter of nervous excitement. Catalina had only one good dress, and it was the same travel-worn one she had arrived in. But she spent the afternoon washing and pressing it, mending a small tear in the sleeve, and doing what she could to make it presentable. Martha lent her a ribbon for her hair, dark blue to match her dress, and helped her pin it up in a style that was more American than Italian. "You look lovely," Martha said, and there was an unexpected gentleness in her voice. "That boy is lucky." "I am lucky," Catalina corrected softly. "He is good man." "That he is. His grandmother and I were friends. She raised him right, taught him to see people for who they are, not where they come from. You will be safe with him." Colt arrived exactly at 7, wearing his best shirt and pants, his hair neatly combed and his boots polished. He held his hat in his hands and looked at Catalina with open admiration. "You look beautiful," he said. She understood that word. "Thank you, you look." She did not know the word for handsome, so she gestured at him and said, "Good, very good." He laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "I will take that as a compliment." The community hall was a large wooden building that served as church, meeting hall, and gathering space for the town. Tonight, it was strung with lanterns and filled with people, and a small group of musicians in the corner played lively tunes on fiddle, guitar, and accordion. Catalina had never seen anything quite like it. In her village, there had been festivals and dances, but they were different from this, more formal and with different music. This was wild and free, and everyone seemed to be laughing and moving without concern for perfect steps or proper form. Colt led her into the crowd, his hand warm on her elbow. "Do you know how to dance?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not this dance. In Italy, different." "That is all right. I will teach you. It is not hard, just follow me." And so she did. His hand found hers. His other hand rested lightly on her waist, and he guided her through the steps of the dance. She stumbled at first, self-conscious and worried about doing it wrong, but he was patient, laughing with her rather than at her, and gradually she began to relax and simply feel the music. "See," he said, leaning close so she could hear him over the fiddle. "You are doing great." The world narrowed to just the two of them, moving together, his eyes on hers, and Catalina felt something shift inside her. This was more than kindness. This was more than gratitude. This feeling that made her breath catch and her skin warm. This was something she had heard about in stories and songs but never truly believed in. They danced through several songs, and then Colt led her outside where the air was cooler and the noise less overwhelming. The night sky was vast and dark, scattered with more stars than Catalina had ever seen in Italy. "It is beautiful," she breathed, looking up. "Yes," Colt said, but he was looking at her, not the sky. She turned to meet his gaze and felt her cheeks warm. "Colt, I want to say something. But I do not have words. My English is not good." "Tell me in Italian," he said. "I may not understand the words, but I will understand the feeling." So she did. She spoke in her native tongue, the words flowing freely for the first time since arriving in Montana, telling him how grateful she was, how he had made her feel human again when she had felt like nothing, how he had given her hope when she had none, how she thought about him constantly, how her heart beat faster when she saw him. She spoke quickly, passionately, her hands moving with her words, and when she finished, she felt breathless and vulnerable. Colt looked at her with an expression of wonder. "I did not understand the words," he said softly. "But you are right. I understand the feeling because I feel it too." He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and gently cupped her cheek with his hand. His thumb traced along her cheekbone and his eyes searched hers for permission. She gave it, leaning into his touch, and he bent down and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and careful, a first kiss that held the promise of more. When they pulled apart, Catalina was smiling, and so was Colt. "Your voice is music," he said again, "in English or Italian or any language at all, and I want to keep listening to it for as long as you will let me." "Always," she said, the English word clear and certain. "I want always." "Always," he repeated and kissed her again. The weeks that followed were the happiest Catalina had known since leaving Italy. Her life settled into a routine of work and simple pleasures, and Colt became the center around which everything else revolved. He came into town twice a week when he could, and they walked together, sat together, talked in their halting, patient way that gradually became easier as her English improved, and he learned a few words of Italian. He took her to see the ranch where he worked, a sprawling operation with hundreds of cattle, and a bunkhouse where the cowboys stayed. His boss, Mr. Gregory, was a stern but fair man in his 50s who looked at Catalina with curiosity but not unkindness. "So you are the Italian girl Colt cannot stop talking about," he said, and Colt looked embarrassed. "Sir, I never—" "Oh, hush, you talk about her constantly." Mr. Gregory turned to Catalina. "He is a good man and a hard worker. You could do worse." "I know," Catalina said clearly. "I am lucky." Mr. Gregory laughed, a booming sound. "Well, you are welcome here anytime, Miss Lopez. Any friend of Colt's is a friend of this ranch." As autumn approached and the air grew cooler, the fall roundup began. Colt was gone for 3 weeks, working from dawn to dark to gather the cattle from the summer ranges, and Catalina missed him with an ache that surprised her with its intensity. She focused on her work, on improving her English, on saving money, but the days felt gray without him. When he finally returned, riding into town dusty and exhausted, she ran to him in a way that would have scandalized her mother but felt utterly right. He dismounted and caught her in his arms, lifting her off her feet and burying his face in her hair. "I missed you," he said. "God, Catalina, I missed you so much." "I missed you too," she said into his shoulder. "Every day, too much." He pulled back just enough to look at her. "I did a lot of thinking while I was out there, about you, about us, about the future. And I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other for a few months, but I need to tell you something." Her heart was pounding. "What?" "I love you," he said, the words simple and direct. "I love you, Catalina Lopez. Your voice, your courage, your strength, everything about you. I love you." Tears spilled down her cheeks, happy tears this time. "I love you too," she said, and the English words felt right and true. "I love you, Colt Anderson." He kissed her there in the middle of the street with half the town watching, and Catalina did not care. She was home. Not in a place, but in a person. She had found home. That evening they walked along the banks of the Yellowstone River, the water flowing dark and quiet beside them. Colt held her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm, and his expression was serious. "I want to marry you," he said. "I know your English is still not perfect and we come from different worlds, but I do not care about any of that. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and come home to you every night. Will you marry me?" Catalina stopped walking and turned to face him fully. In the fading light, his eyes were earnest and hopeful and full of love. "Yes," she said, the word clear and strong. "Yes, I will marry you." He let out a breath she had not realized he was holding and pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for saying yes. I promise I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." "I will not regret," she said. "I know this. You are good man, best man." They married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at Martha's boarding house. The only guests were Martha, Mrs. Henderson, and her husband, the doctor, Otto from the cafe, and a few of the cowboys from the Three Rivers Ranch. Colt wore his best suit, borrowed from Mr. Gregory, and Catalina wore a dress she had made herself from fabric Mrs. Henderson had given her as a wedding gift, a soft blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. The ceremony was conducted by a traveling minister who happened to be passing through Miles City, and Catalina spoke her vows in careful English, each word deliberate and meaningful. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Colt kissed her with a joy that made everyone in the room smile. Mr. Gregory had given them a wedding gift beyond price, a small cabin on the ranch property that had been used for storage but could be fixed up into a home. It needed work, needed cleaning and repairs and furniture, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. They spent their first night as husband and wife in that cabin, with blankets borrowed from Martha spread on the floor in front of a fire Colt had built in the fireplace. The space was bare and cold, but neither of them cared. They lay in each other's arms, talking softly, planning their future, making promises in the firelight. "I will learn English better," Catalina said. "I will be good wife, make you proud." "You already make me proud," Colt said, running his fingers through her loose hair. "And I will learn Italian. We will teach each other." "What words do you want to learn?" He thought for a moment. "Teach me how to say I love you in Italian." "Ti amo," she said softly. "Ti amo," he repeated carefully. "Ti amo, Catalina. Ti amo, Colt." They made love gently and carefully, discovering each other with patience and tenderness. And afterward, Catalina lay with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat and feeling safe in a way she had not felt since before her grandmother died. "Tell me about your family," Colt said. "About your life in Italy. I want to know everything." So she told him, her English better now but still imperfect, about her parents who worked the olive grove, about her 3 younger sisters whom she missed desperately, about her grandmother who had told her stories and taught her to sew and insisted she could have a bigger life if she was brave enough to reach for it. She told him about the village festivals, about the sea she had seen for the first time when she boarded the ship, about the fear and excitement of leaving everything she knew. And he told her about his parents who had died of fever when he was 8, about his grandmother who had taken him in and raised him on a small farm in Wyoming, about moving to Montana after she died because he could not bear to stay in the place that reminded him of her. He told her about learning to be a cowboy, about the ranch life he loved, about his dreams of someday having his own land. They talked until the fire burned low, and sleep finally claimed them, wrapped in each other's arms on the floor of their empty cabin, happier than either had ever been. The first year of their marriage was hard work but filled with joy. Colt continued to work at the Three Rivers Ranch, and Catalina kept her jobs at the cafe and with Mrs. Henderson, saving every penny they could. Together, they transformed the cabin into a home. Colt repaired the roof and fixed the windows while Catalina scrubbed and painted and sewed curtains from fabric remnants. They bought a bed from a family moving back east, a table and chairs from the general store, pots and pans and dishes one piece at a time. Catalina planted a garden in the spring, coaxing vegetables from the Montana soil the way she had learned from her father, and the fresh food supplemented their meager income. She taught Colt to make pasta from scratch, and he taught her to ride a horse, patient with her fear until she could gallop across the ranch land with confidence. Her English improved steadily, though her accent remained strong, and Colt learned enough Italian to make her laugh with his pronunciation. They created their own language, a mix of both tongues and gestures and looks that spoke volumes without words. Martha became like a mother to Catalina, fierce and protective, and Mrs. Henderson became a friend, praising her skill with a needle and introducing her to other women in town who needed sewing done. Slowly, carefully, Catalina built a life in Miles City. But she was also homesick, a deep ache that never quite went away. She missed her family, missed her sisters, missed the familiar sounds and smells of her village. She wrote letters home every month, telling them about her life, about Colt, about Montana, and her mother wrote back. Letters that took months to arrive and that Catalina read and reread until the paper was soft with handling. Colt understood. He would find her sometimes standing at the window of their cabin, looking east as if she could see across the thousands of miles to Italy, and he would wrap his arms around her from behind and hold her without speaking. "I am happy here," she told him once. "With you, I am happy." "But I miss them so much." "I know," he said. "And someday, when we have saved enough money, we will go visit them. I promise you that, Catalina. I promise." It was a promise that sustained her through the hard days, a light at the end of a long tunnel. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Catalina discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but when Martha confirmed it with the knowing eyes of a woman who had helped birth half the babies in Miles City, Catalina felt a mix of joy and terror that left her breathless. She told Colt that evening after he came home from work, dusty and tired. He was washing his hands in the basin when she said, "I have news." He turned, hearing something in her voice, and his eyes widened. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." For a moment, he just stared at her, and then his face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen. He let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby. I am going to be a father. Catalina, I cannot believe it. This is the best news, the very best news." He was gentle with her throughout the pregnancy, protective to the point of being comical. He did not want her to lift anything heavy, did not want her to work too hard, and Catalina had to remind him repeatedly that women in her village worked in the fields until the day they gave birth. "This is not Italy," he would say stubbornly. "And you are carrying my child. I will not take chances." She loved him for it, even as she rolled her eyes at his overprotectiveness. As her belly grew, so did her excitement and fear. She wished desperately for her mother, for her grandmother, for the women of her village who would have known what to do, how to help. Instead, she had Martha, who proved to be worth a dozen village women in her competence and kindness. "You will be fine," Martha told her when Catalina expressed her fears. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. You are strong and healthy, and I will be with you every step of the way." The baby came in late November, during the first snow of the season. The labor was long and difficult, and Colt paced outside the cabin like a caged animal while Martha and Mrs. Henderson attended to Catalina inside. He could hear her crying out, and each sound was like a knife to his heart. Just when he thought he could not take it anymore, just when he was about to burst through the door regardless of propriety, he heard a different sound. A baby's cry, thin and wailing, and the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. Martha opened the door, her sleeves rolled up and her face tired but smiling. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy baby boy, and Catalina is fine though she is exhausted. Come meet your child." Colt stumbled into the cabin, his hands shaking. Catalina lay in their bed, pale and sweaty, her hair sticking to her forehead, but her eyes were bright with tears and joy. And in her arms, wrapped in a blanket Catalina had knitted herself, was a tiny baby with a red face and dark hair. "Our son," she said softly. "Colt, look, our son." He sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the tiny person who was his child, his blood, his future. The baby had stopped crying and was looking around with unfocused eyes, and Colt felt love crash over him like a wave, so intense it took his breath away. "He is perfect," Colt whispered. "Catalina, he is absolutely perfect, and you are amazing. I am so proud of you," she smiled tiredly. "I want to name him after your father and my father. Maybe we can use both names." Colt's father had been named Charles, and after some discussion, they decided to name the baby Carlo, the Italian version, as a compromise that honored both their heritages. Carlo Anderson, born November 28, 1883, in a small cabin on the Three Rivers Ranch in Miles City, Montana. The next few months were a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder. Colt had not known it was possible to love something so much, to feel such fierce protection for this tiny person who depended on them for everything. He would wake in the night to find Catalina nursing the baby, singing soft Italian lullabies that her grandmother had sung to her, and he would lie there listening, marveling at the family they had created. Catalina was a natural mother, patient and loving, and she seemed to bloom in this new role. Her body changed, her breasts full with milk, her hips wider, and Colt thought she had never been more beautiful. But he also saw how tired she was, how she sometimes looked at Carlo with an expression of longing that he knew was for her own mother, her own sisters who should have been there to share this moment. He wished he could give that to her, but all he could offer was his support and his love, and he gave both freely. As winter turned to spring and Carlo grew from a tiny newborn to a chubby, smiling baby, life settled into a new normal. Catalina went back to some of her sewing work, bringing Carlo with her in a basket, and Colt continued to work at the ranch, though he now hurried home every evening rather than staying for the evening card games with the other cowboys. Mr. Gregory was understanding, even amused. "Being a father changes a man," he said. "I remember when my own children were born. Nothing else matters quite as much anymore, does it?" "No, sir," Colt agreed. "Nothing else matters as much." One evening in May, when Carlo was 6 months old and the Montana landscape was green with spring, Colt came home with news. He found Catalina in the garden, Carlo playing on a blanket nearby, and his expression was so serious that she immediately put down her hoe. "What is wrong?" she asked. "Nothing is wrong. Actually, something might be very right, but I want to talk to you about it first." He took her hands. "Mr. Gregory is selling off some of his land. He is getting older and wants to make things more manageable. He offered to sell me 100 acres on the eastern edge of the ranch, with a good stream and grazing land. He would even extend me credit, let me pay it off over time." Catalina's eyes widened. Our own land," Colt confirmed. "It would be hard, Catalina." "Harder than what we are doing now. We would have to build a new house, start our own herd, work every hour of every day, and we would be in debt for years. But it would be ours. We would be working for ourselves, for our future, for Carlo's future." She looked at him, this man who had saved her, who had loved her, who had given her a home and a family and a reason to hope. "You want this," she said. It was not a question. "I want this," he admitted. "But only if you want it too. I will not make this choice without you." Catalina thought about the life she had dreamed of back in Italy, the safety and security she had hoped to find in America. She thought about her grandmother's words, about being brave enough to reach for something bigger. She looked at Carlo, playing happily in the grass, and at Colt, waiting for her answer. "Yes," she said, "we do this. Together we can do anything." Colt let out a breath and smiled, then pulled her close and kissed her. "Thank you," he whispered against her lips. "Thank you for believing in me, in us." "Always," she said. "I believe always." The next 2 years were the hardest and most rewarding of their lives. They bought the land from Mr. Gregory, signing papers that made Catalina's hand shake because it felt so huge, so permanent. They built a house, a simple 2-room cabin at first, but with plans to expand as they could afford it, and they bought 10 head of cattle to start their herd. Colt worked for Mr. Gregory in exchange for the use of ranch equipment and advice on managing cattle, and Catalina continued her sewing work, now taking on more complicated projects like wedding dresses and fine shirts for the wealthier families in Miles City. Every penny they earned went back into the ranch, into fencing and more cattle and supplies. Carlo grew into a talkative, energetic toddler who spoke a mix of English and Italian and kept them both running. Catalina was pregnant again by the winter of 1885, and their daughter, Lucia, was born in March of 1886, named after Catalina's grandmother. Lucia had her father's blue eyes and her mother's dark hair, and Colt declared she was the most beautiful baby girl ever born after her mother, of course. Carlo was fascinated by his little sister, wanting to help with everything, and Catalina had to constantly watch that he did not help the baby too enthusiastically. The ranch slowly took shape. Their herd grew to 50 head, then 70, then 100. Colt proved to be a natural rancher, with an eye for good cattle and a patience for the hard work it required. Catalina managed the household finances with an iron will, stretching every dollar, refusing to spend on anything that was not absolutely necessary. "We will pay off Mr. Gregory in 10 years if we are careful," she told Colt. "Maybe less. And then we will take that trip to Italy," Colt said. "I have not forgotten my promise. I want to meet your family, want them to meet Carlo and Lucia. As soon as we can afford it, we go." It became their shared dream, something to work toward through the long days and difficult seasons. When Carlo was 5 and Lucia was 2, Catalina received a letter from her mother with news that made her weep. Her youngest sister, Teresa, was getting married. The wedding would be in the summer, and her mother wrote that the whole family wished Catalina could be there, that Teresa missed her sister terribly. Catalina showed Colt the letter that evening after the children were asleep, and he saw the longing in her eyes. "We cannot afford it yet," she said quietly. "I know we cannot, but I wish." "I know," he pulled her close. "I wish we could too, but your mother is right. Someday you will see them again. Someday soon, I hope." That night, Colt lay awake thinking. They had been married for 5 years, together for nearly 6. Catalina had never once complained about her homesickness, had never made him feel guilty for the choice she had made to stay with him in Montana. But he saw the sadness in her eyes when letters came from Italy, saw how she held them like precious treasures. He made a decision. The next day, he rode into Miles City and went to the bank. He spoke with Mr. Garrett, the bank manager, and explained what he wanted to do. Mr. Garrett listened, looked over Colt's accounts and his loan papers, and finally nodded. "It is a risk," Mr. Garrett said, "but you have proven yourself to be responsible and hardworking. I think we can make this happen." When Colt got home that evening, he found Catalina in the kitchen, preparing dinner while Lucia played at her feet and Carlo did his lessons at the table. She looked up when he came in, and something in his expression made her straighten. "What did you do?" she asked. "I went to the bank. I talked to Mr. Garrett about extending our loan just a little to give us some extra money." He paused. "Enough money for you to go to Italy for your sister's wedding." Catalina froze, her hands still in the bread dough she was kneading. "What? You should be at your sister's wedding. Your family misses you and you miss them, so you are going to go." "Colt, we cannot afford that, the ranch." "The ranch will be fine. We will manage." "I spoke with Martha, and she said Lucia can stay with her during the days while I am working. Carlo can come out on the ranch with me like he loves to do. We will make it work for a few months." Tears were streaming down Catalina's face now. "You would do that? You would take on more debt? You would manage the children alone just so I can see my family?" "Yes," Colt said simply. "Because I love you. Because you have sacrificed so much to be here with me. Because you deserve this." She launched herself at him, bread dough and all, and he caught her, holding her tight while she cried into his shoulder. "Thank you," she kept saying. "Thank you, thank you." "You do not have to thank me. You are my wife. Your happiness is my happiness." Catalina left for Italy in June, taking a train to the coast and then a ship across the Atlantic. It was the same journey in reverse that she had made 6 years earlier, but this time, she was not fleeing to an unknown future. This time, she knew she had a home to return to, a husband who loved her, children who needed her. The reunion with her family was everything she had dreamed of and more. Her mother wept, holding her close and marveling at how she had changed. Her sisters, all grown now, surrounded her with questions about America, about Montana, about her husband and children. Her father, quiet and steady, embraced her and told her he was proud of her courage. She spent 3 months in Italy, attending Teresa's wedding, helping with the olive harvest, reconnecting with the place that had formed her. But even as she reveled in being home, she found herself missing Montana, missing Colt, missing her children with an ache that grew sharper every day. "You love him very much," her mother observed one evening as they sat outside watching the sunset over the olive grove. "I do," Catalina said, "more than I ever thought possible, and I miss him. I miss our life together." "Then you have found what we all hope for," her mother said gently. "You have found a true partner. Hold on to that, Catalina. Not everyone is so lucky." When Catalina returned to Montana in September, stepping off the train in Miles City, she saw Colt waiting on the platform with Carlo and Lucia. Carlo broke free and ran to her, shouting, "Mama!" And she swept him up, tears streaming down her face. Colt approached more slowly, carrying Lucia, who looked shy after 3 months apart. "Hello," Colt said, his voice rough with emotion. "Welcome home." "Hello," Catalina said, smiling through her tears. She reached out and touched his face, needing to reassure herself that he was real. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too. The house has not been the same without you. We have been counting the days." Lucia finally recognized her mother and reached out, whimpering, and Catalina took her, holding both children close while Colt wrapped his arms around all of them. They stood there on the platform, a family reunited, complete again. That night, after the children were asleep and they lay in their bed, Colt held Catalina close. "Was it good?" he asked. "Seeing your family." "It was wonderful," she said. "But coming home to you, to our children, to our life, that was better. I learned something, Colt. I learned that home is not a place. Home is where your heart is, and my heart is here with you." "Ti amo," he said in careful Italian. "Is that right?" She smiled in the darkness. "Yes, that is right. Ti amo, Colt, now and always." The years continued to unfold, bringing both challenges and joys. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. They added a third child, a son they named Michael in 1888, and a fourth, another daughter named Rose, in 1891. Their house grew with their family, Colt adding rooms as they could afford them, until it was a proper home with a big kitchen, a sitting room, and enough bedrooms for everyone. Carlo grew into a serious boy who loved the ranch and worked alongside his father from the time he could walk. Lucia was bright and curious, asking endless questions and learning to read at an early age. Michael was wild and fearless, constantly giving Catalina heart attacks with his adventures, and Rose was sweet and gentle, the baby of the family. Catalina's English became fluent, though her accent never faded, and she made peace with that. It was part of who she was, part of her story. She taught all her children to speak Italian, wanting them to know both halves of their heritage, and Colt joined the lessons, his Italian improving year by year. They paid off their debt to Mr. Gregory in 1892, 8 years after taking it on, and the day Colt made the final payment, he came home and swept Catalina into his arms, dancing around the kitchen while the children laughed. "We did it," he said. "This land is ours, free and clear. Everything we built, everything we have, it is ours." "We did it together," Catalina corrected. "Everything is together." In 1895, when Carlo was 12 and old enough to help manage the ranch, Colt and Catalina finally made the trip to Italy together. They brought all 4 children, wanting them to meet their Italian grandparents and see where their mother had come from. The trip was chaotic and exhausting and absolutely wonderful. Catalina's parents were older now, grayer and slower, but their joy at meeting their grandchildren was boundless. The children ran through the olive groves where Catalina had played as a child, spoke Italian with their aunts and uncles, and ate their grandmother's cooking until they could barely move. Colt fell in love with Italy, with the ancient stones and the rolling hills and the sea that sparkled in the distance. He understood better why Catalina had been homesick, but he also saw the relief in her eyes when, after 2 months, they boarded the ship to return to America. Ready to go home? He asked as they stood at the ship's rail, watching Italy fade into the distance. Yes, she said without hesitation. I love Italy. It will always be part of me, but Montana is home now. Our ranch, our life, that is where I belong. He kissed her temple. I am glad. Because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. They returned to Montana in the autumn, in time for the fall roundup, and life resumed its familiar patterns. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Colt and Catalina grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. There were hard times, of course. A drought in 1897 that nearly broke them. A winter in 1899 so harsh they lost a quarter of their herd. Illnesses and injuries and the 100 small disasters that make up a life. But through it all, they had each other, and that made everything bearable. In 1900, Carlo, now 17, announced that he wanted to attend agricultural college in Bozeman. Catalina was torn between pride and fear, not wanting her eldest to leave but knowing he needed to grow. Let him go, Colt counseled. He will come back. This ranch is in his blood. And Colt was right. Carlo went to college, learned modern ranching techniques, and returned 2 years later with ideas and energy that helped take the ranch to new levels of success. He married a local girl, Sarah Miller, in 1904, and they built their own house on the far side of the property. Lucia became a teacher, opening a small school on their ranch that served the children of neighboring farms and ranches. Michael, true to his wild nature, became a bronc rider on the rodeo circuit before finally settling down and marrying in 1908. Rose, the youngest, married a lawyer from Miles City and moved into town, though she visited the ranch every Sunday without fail. Colt and Catalina became grandparents and then grandparents many times over. By 1910, they had 7 grandchildren, with more on the way, and their house was constantly full of noise and life and love. One evening in the summer of 1912, 30 years after Catalina had first stepped off that stagecoach in Miles City, she and Colt sat on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over their land. Carlo was running the day-to-day operations of the ranch now, giving them time to rest and enjoy the fruits of their decades of labor. "Do you ever regret it?" Colt asked, taking her hand. "Coming to America, marrying me, this life we built." Catalina looked at him. This man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved, who had loved her when she was lost and alone, who had built a life with her through sheer determination and love. His hair was gray now, his face deeply lined, but his eyes were the same blue-gray that had captured her heart 30 years ago. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for one single moment. You told me once that my voice was music, no matter the words. You made me feel beautiful when I felt broken. You gave me a home, a family, a life beyond anything I dreamed of. How could I regret any of that? I am the lucky one," Colt said, raising her hand to his lips. "You took a chance on a cowboy who had nothing but a dream and a lot of hope. You worked beside me, never complained, raised our children to be good people. You made my life complete." "We made each other complete," Catalina said. "That is what love does. It makes 2 people into one whole." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the stars emerge in the vast Montana sky. In the distance, They could hear their grandchildren playing, Carlo's voice calling them in for supper, the sounds of family and life and home. "Ti amo," Colt said, the Italian words perfect now after decades of practice. "Ti amo," Catalina responded, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Now and always. Forever." The years continued their steady march, bringing more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. Colt and Catalina aged together, their bodies slowing but their love never wavering. They took walks around their land, not as long or as fast as they once did, but still together, still side by side. In 1925, they celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary with all 4 children, 14 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren gathered at the ranch. It was a massive party, with tables set up in the yard and enough food to feed an army. Carlo stood up to make a toast, raising his glass. "To my parents," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Who came from nothing, who built something incredible, who showed all of us what real love and real partnership looks like. Everything I am, everything we all are, we owe to you. Thank you." To Colt and Catalina. Everyone chorused, and Colt and Catalina looked at each other with tears in their eyes, overwhelmed by the legacy they had created. That night, alone again in their house, Colt held Catalina close. They were both in their 70s now, their bodies failing in small ways, but their hearts were as strong as ever. "We did good, didn't we?" Colt asked. "We did very good," Catalina agreed. "We built a family. We built a life. We loved each other every single day. What more could anyone ask for?" "Nothing," Colt said, kissing her forehead. "Nothing at all." Colt passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1927, with Catalina holding his hand. He was 72 years old, and he died on the land he loved, surrounded by the family he had built. Catalina was devastated by the loss, feeling as if half of herself had been torn away, but she found strength in her children and grandchildren, in the legacy they had created together. She lived another 8 years, dying in the spring of 1935 at the age of 75. Her last words were in Italian, something about olive trees and music, and Carlo, holding her hand, believed she was seeing Colt again, waiting for her as he always had. And every year on their anniversary, the family gathered at those graves to tell the story again. The story of the immigrant woman who spoke broken English and the cowboy who told her that her voice was music, no matter the words. The story of 2 people from different worlds who built one world together, who loved each other through hardship and joy, who proved that home is not a place but a person, and that love can transcend any barrier if it is true and strong and brave. It was a story of the Wild West, of Montana in the days when the land was still wild and the future was still unwritten. But more than that, it was a story of love, pure and simple and enduring, the kind of love that built nations and families and legacies that would last forever. The kind of love that, once found, can never truly die.